Hi, I'm Emmanuelle Delmas-Glass. I'm from the Yale Center for British Art. Wait just a sec. So before my colleague Edward Town goes in detail about our IIIF project, I want to take a few minutes to give you an overview of the Yale Center for British Art digital strategy and how this IIIF project fits in it. The center is committed to using technology to make its collections as accessible as possible. Our collections data is exposed via the web in both a human and machine-readable format. And this strategy is supported by 4 critical elements. Let me go back to this. The open access policy, data exchange standards and protocols, open source tools, and linked open data. The human-readable format, which you see here, this is our online collections catalog, allows users to search and view documents as well as images through the web and on mobile devices. Thousands of images of works in the center's collection, believed to be in the public domain, are available for free through the center's online collections catalog, which soon will be blacklight. Since 2011, under the Yale University's open access policy, anyone may use the center's open access material without further application, authorization, or fees due to the center or to Yale, and that includes commercial purposes. The center implemented this policy with a great degree of openness, which was quite groundbreaking in 2011. As we continue to expose our collections, we strive to allow access through other applications and devices and are open to others developing alternative access interfaces to the collections. To support these efforts, we allow access to collections data in a machine-readable format. To expose our collections dataset to service providers, we rely on the community-developed metadata standard Lido and the open source XML exporter Cobot to contribute metadata and links to images via the OAI PMH protocol. Familiarity with these data exchange standards and protocols allowed the center to be the museum that contributed the most assets to the Google Art project, for example, and that's the screenshot you see lower right. We use the same process to contribute our assets to the Yale-wide single search box, so that researchers interested in Yale's special collections can access them from just one single point. Machine-readable data can also be accessed querying our linked open data semantic endpoint, which has been in production for about 2 years now. As many other cultural heritage institutions, the center has been digitizing its collections for quite some time. But unlike many others, at least in the US, it has taken the additional step to organize its data with an ontology called the Conceptual Reference Model, or CRM. The CRM has been supported or developed over many years and is still being developed by a community of active cultural heritage institutions practitioners, and is supported by the International Council of Museums Committee for Documentation. The role of this ontology is to express the relationships between things, people, places, events, times, and concepts in order to contribute to the network the highest quality research data possible. So through this very brief overview, I hope I give you a sense of what the center is trying to use, that the center is trying to use community-developed standards and tools to stimulate creative and scholarly reuse of its images and data to in turn support scholarship. And we're very excited to use IIIF and the Mirador Viewer to help develop it further for the museum community. And on to Ed.
Good morning, hi. So this morning I'm going to give a very brief description of an in-depth cataloguing project at the Yale Center for British Art, where we can see the potential for image sharing software playing a decisive role in helping us solve some of our key research questions. Our in-depth cataloguing project comes off the back of the Making Art in Tudor Britain project at the National Portrait Gallery in London, a 7-year project involving a systematic examination of over 120 pictures. And this is an image from their project website. So although their focus of their technical examination was on their own pictures, the National Portrait Gallery occasionally travelled outside of their collection to look at other comparable works to help form judgments about attribution and dating. The Yale Centre for British Art's Reformation to Restoration project follows in a similar vein, and although we have less than a quarter of the pictures from this period, we have greater liberty to travel outside our collection to gather comparative material and more frequent recourse to collaborate with other institutions. And while we collect our data based upon the precedents set by the National Portrait Gallery, there is an important difference between the two collections. And namely, this is that at the National Portrait Gallery, the collection was acquired on the merit of the sitter's contribution to British history and the national narrative, while the Yale Centre for British Art's collection was assembled to provide a comprehensive survey of British art, illustrated by examples of work of the most significant artists active between 1550 and 1850. And as such, questions of attribution, i.e. who was the artist responsible for painting this work, are at the forefront of our minds as we catalogue our 29 pictures. Now, attempts to attribute work from this period are often frustrated by the fact that artists of this period rarely signed their work, and there's very little documentary evidence relating to either the production or the ownership of portable paintings. This means that the objects themselves take on even greater significance. And this is why I work very closely with my colleague in the Conservation Department, Jessica David, combining our expertise as art historian and conservator respectively, so that we can bring as much to bear on these difficult and enigmatic objects. And a great deal of what we do on a day-to-day basis involves the collation, organisation, and comparison of visual material. This might take the form of anything from an overall image of a painting in X-ray, an infrared reflectogram, to a photomicrograph, a cross-section of a painting in sample, as we see here. And I hope that this slide gives a sense of the way that we combine traditional art historical connoisseurship with the very latest in conservation science. Comparing this information on screen enables us to make new links between paintings that might not otherwise be associated with one another, and allows us to establish oeuvres for artists with greater confidence than ever before. And in the time that remains, we'd like to share one of the project's recent discoveries and use an example as how we'd like to develop some of Mirador's functions so we can make the very most of the new discoveries that are coming to light. Now, the Yale Centre for British Art's Unknown Woman of 1567 is a typical example from our collection and our project. Without a known identity or a credible attribution, we are dependent on the physical characteristics of the painting to guide our understanding of its relationship to other pictures, many of which are also missing that vital tombstone information. In order to establish our portrait amongst a group of paintings that could potentially be associated with a specific painter or workshop, we need to scrutinise how each was constructed, from the preparation of the oak support to the application of the final highlights and the characteristics of the date inscription. Unfortunately, what we can rarely do is compare paintings side by side. We rarely, if ever, see them together, which is why the storage, sharing, and annotation of our documentation is so vital to our research process, as is our ability to effectively present and defend our theories to our colleagues. Traditionally, this happens using a linear display of images in a presentation-style application such as PowerPoint, guided by a linear narrative. And what we seek is a more objective, real-time workspace shared between colleagues who can comment or build upon our observations as we develop them. So, on to the case study. In our effort to prove the relationship between our unknown woman on the left and the portrait of the Countess of Sussex at Sidney Sussex College in Cambridge, we must create documentation. We cannot bring our portrait to Cambridge with us when we travel, so we must gather as much information as we can from the portrait of the Countess of Sussex and carry it back to Yale with us to compare with our painting. Now, as you know, this is commonplace practice. But the process becomes complicated when we want to share this data with our colleagues at other institutions, such as the National Portrait Gallery and elsewhere, who do not have easy access to either painting. Our research paths are rarely linear, and, as with this case study, our arguments move out in several directions, originating from one unidentified portrait. So, in the process of taking infrared photographs of the Countess of Sussex, sorry, this shows some of the annotations that we would like to develop and take further. So here we see the infrared reflectogram on the right, taken at in situ in Sydney Sussex College earlier this year. And when taking this photograph, we discovered another portrait buried beneath the paint layer. You can see faintly there, and we've just traced this to make this clear here. Now, it became immediately apparent to us that this underlying portrait looked a great deal like a portrait of Elizabeth I, privately owned, but currently housed at Tate Britain in London. And when referring back to our data, we noticed that both the two portraits are almost identical in dimensions. And when overlaid, it's evident that the portrait of Elizabeth I registers exactly with the overpainted portrait beneath that of the Countess of Sussex. So it's our conjecture that these three portraits originate from the same artist's workshop. But these arguments require extensive illustration and careful description. Ideally, we'd like to place this information on a shared workspace where colleagues could review and comment on our theories while having access to the original image files. Functions like transparency, which we've seen here, which at the moment we're doing in PowerPoint, and overlaying would be optionable and editable. The images would be constrained proportionally so that scale comparisons remain reliable. More importantly, we need a space where more images can be added to by our colleagues. Our data is growing constantly, and we need better ways to compare and critique it. As such, we're hoping to use this tool in a sponsored project that would enhance our capabilities to collate, share, and compare visual information. We're confident that a developed version of Mirador with greater functionality would provide the ideal platform to unlock the complicated and often vexed question of authorship in Tudor and Jacobean painting. Thank you very much.